So close. And a 6-3 formation. You can't really have a go at Arteta and his plan here. But why did he choose this specific plan? That's what we're going to talk about. And of course, we're going to talk about all of it. And it was a ding-dong game. Thank goodness. Because, let's be honest, I thought it was going to be an absolute stink show. Trying not to swear these days, guys. We're going to talk about the controversy. We're going to talk about the sending off. We're going to talk about Rodri and how that changed the game. And then, of course, the sending off and how that changed the game. And how Arteta very, very nearly stopped this Manchester City side. Absolutely fantastic stuff. By the way, we're nearly at 350,000 subscribers. So if you want to be in that final 100, that would be lovely. Hit that button. Let's begin with a bit of tactics and the tactics board. Now, I thought this game would be decided in this area of the pitch. And it was not that area, this area here. Basically between the 18-yard box. But I thought it would be very, very important who owned the centre of the pitch. And I knew Arsenal would want to ensure that they were solid in the centre of the pitch as well, as Man City looked to do a lot of the time. And if we go back to previous games, this was a very different plan, a very, very, very different plan from Pep Guardiola. If we go back to the 0-0 against in March, really, really interesting stuff actually, because look how narrow Man City were in this game, right? And you've got players like Akanji playing kind of right back and high as a right back as well. Just very unlike Man City this season. And I think the Chelsea game was definitely an eye-opener. And we did a video talking about the width that he was putting into the team. And I thought that this game, this was part of the plan, was having that width. Arsenal as well, if you think about this game as well, right in the middle of the pitch. Now, of course, Odegaard not in this game, so it was always going to be a little bit different. But I think that Arsenal were hoping for something like this. Now, what did we actually get? Yeah, that was a little bit different because this is the full game, by the way, in terms of the average positions. But actually, if you want to see the second half of the game, this is absolutely wild, by the way. This is the second half of this game of football. That's how high Man City were. But what's interesting here is that those half spaces, they were not sort of utilised in terms of the average positions of these players. And also so many players within that 18-yard box as well. And when it comes to Arsenal, something really interesting here, William Saliba, pretty much on the 6-yard line. We'll talk about that in depth because Arteta, he tries something a little bit different here. And I understand why. But let's talk about the goals first, because I think we would have been focusing on the goals if it hadn't been for, of course, all the controversy around it, the quick goal and all that stuff. And I'll give my take on that. But let's begin with this goal, because people aren't talking about the right thing here when it comes to this goal. The finish is great. We'll talk about the finish. But what I really, really liked about the setup of Man City, in particular with Bernardo Silva on this right-hand side, is his understanding of space. And what he did a lot of the time was that he would start here and make this run out wide. And what that did, it allowed Savio, who likes to get the ball wide and then step into that half space, it gave him that opportunity. But Silva doing that is not something that I think Arsenal were expecting. And after 8 minutes, they were caught out. And so many people are talking about Gundogan. And I get it, because he obviously kept him honest in terms of William Saliba, in terms of staying in parallel with him and that left space for Haaland. I get that. But what about Thomas Partey? And what about Gabriel? The reason for those two players coming out of this position here, and Partey would have wanted to stay in this position right here to stop exactly the pass that comes through, is because of the movement of Bernardo Silva. It's absolutely phenomenal stuff. And you can see the distance it then provides by having that width and having that player that can understand it and play in so many different positions. He is absolutely astounding in terms of interpretation of the space. And it allows for a huge area of space. And this is very un-Arsenal-like. You don't normally see what happened here. Calafiori looking to get tight with Savio, but there's all that space for him to go into. Bernardo Silva dragging players, as we've spoken about, in terms of these two. And that's what leads to that space for Haaland to utilise, of which he does. And quick question for the comments. This is huge. This is important. Was it a toe poke or was it outside of the boot? I actually think he kind of went outside of the boot. What I really love about this finish, which is very unique and actually more sort of high-end than it kind of looks in the moment, is the fact that he doesn't really give a tell. You don't really know where he's going with his body shape. Like, you wouldn't have thought that he was going to go in that bottom corner. And it looks a bit clumsy. It looks a bit ugly. But actually, it's really, really clever stuff. Let's go back to the tactics board. because when we're talking about that space in the middle, Man City started to kind of own the game a little bit after that, which I think we knew was going to happen because of not having Odegaard and Arsenal just trying to get through this week. I've got a big question on that, by the way, at the end, so stick around. So the 18-yard box was really important for Arsenal. Wanted to be solid there. You could see that the width of Savio and Doku with the movement in particular of Silva leads to that first goal and that space between those lines there. But in terms of the box here, this middle of the pitch of which I thought was going to be really interesting to see, I was wondering to see if Man City would go with a 1-3-6. Now, 6 is a bit of a scary number but the difference that we saw, and I saw this in the Atalanta game in midweek. Is it Atalanta? Who did they play? Inter Milan, forgive me. The Inter Milan game. It was a 1-3-6. And what was really interesting here was, in particular in this game, is that instead of it looking like this on paper, actually what happened was Gundogan kind of came here. Gvardiol came and stood in this half space, which was wild. But he actually barely touched the ball in this area. It was a way of kind of freezing these other guys, Timber, Saliba, Partey, Saka, so that it gave Doku space. Doku didn't do much with that space, again, because Timber is a phenomenal defender. And Arsenal are, I would say, probably the best team out of possession in world football right now. I don't know how you can dispute that, especially after a performance like today. But in that midfield, you then had Akanji stepping into that same line as Rodri, and Walker stepping into that same line as Rodri, and Diaz being in behind. And the reason for that was that going forward, Trossard and Havertz didn't have too much kind of going in behind. It was a little bit conservative for them, which again, we were kind of expecting. But you could see it on the pitch, clear as day. Not on this one, but on this one. Because if we move it along, you can see that. You see that 1-3-6. Let me just draw the lines here for you. So you got Diaz at the back, 1, 3, and then Gvardiol, so interesting his positioning here. You can see him essentially, he's playing as a 10. What are you doing there, Gvardiol? But he never really wanted the ball. It was all a bit of a decoy to allow Doku to get the ball. Now, of course, Rodri then goes off injured. I don't know how bad it is at the time of recording. You don't want to play like that, getting hurt as badly as it looked. But of course, you've got to be kind of concerned with it. And Kovacic comes on. So when Kovacic comes on, you're thinking, okay, what will the change be? It's been quite clear in what's happening. Let's move it forward. Again, it's a similar one here. But what actually happened was very little. They stuck with the same shape. They were brave in having Kovacic in that position there. And again, when we talk about Gvardiol, who no one will talk about him, but that is really, really interesting to see him as high as that all the time. He's confident enough to do that role. And it's one of those ones where he looks like a big, scary centre-back, but he's got so much more to him. But Kovacic sitting back, you had that line of 3, once again, the 1, and then all those players higher up. Yes, Gundogan dropping deep into half spaces, same with Silva, but also those guys pushing back at times, try and push that line back to create spaces in between. And they were dominating. But things happen. Right, the time has come. We're going to talk about Calafiori's goal. I thought his debut was really, really impressive. I thought he's really positive. That's actually something we've done a video on when he signed. We looked back at his career up to now and his ability to play as a centre-back or in a back 3 or as a left-back. And his positivity was something that absolutely leapt out in his previous roles at his previous clubs. But we're talking about dark arts here. Now, let's go back a little bit because Man City fans weren't happy about this. And can I just say, I was absolutely fine with all the dark arts on show. I thought the kind of crunching, when it's a shoulder, if you're clever, if you're being obstructed, this is the top 2 teams in the country. I want to see a bit of needle, and I'm fine with it, okay? Did Haaland go a little bit far when he's throwing the ball in Gabriel's head? Yeah. If I was a Man City fan, would I be screaming at that? Yeah. But that's part of the fun as well, okay? And of course, Man City weren't happy with the goal. But I think the thing to remember here is that Kyle Walker has ages. And actually, when he's making his way back, which shows how quick he is, and you've got Martinelli, who's also rapid, Kyle Walker's still chatting away, going, oh, by the way, we're going to play a free fight. Let's just defend this moment, shall we? And I think they're completely within their rights to play it quickly. I'm fine with it. I'm absolutely fine with it. Not even dark for me. And we'll talk about the second half dark arts, because I think that's important as well. But the goal is phenomenal. Did everyone just scream out loud when it happened? It was such a good goal. The ball goes in behind. It is opportunistic. As I say, Arsenal were struggling to break them down very often in this one. And, of course, we get ourselves a pa. But first, let's go back here because this is really interesting. And what I will say is when you go here, what is to be applauded is both these teams work so hard when they don't have the ball. They work so hard. And so you've got all these players here. And if you look at the Arsenal team, you've only actually got 3 players in that half of the pitch. Now, I understand it's a quick counter-attack, so fair enough. But Man City working super, super hard here. And actually, the mix of that and Calafiore's positivity is what brings the goal in 2 senses. So first of all, Man City, you can see we got loads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 players. Is that right? 6, 7, 8, 9 players in the penalty box working hard for the team. But so much so that I think they were never ever thinking, Savio's a good example of it, but all of them were like, get back. But they weren't thinking about the gorgeous locked Italian. And the fact that he's there with them, I think, says so much about him as a player. That's stage 1 of this. For him to even be there. And what he might do, what most players might do, is he might put a cross to the back post for Havertz. No! Or no. No, as they say in Italy. The fact that he's having a shot here, which is zoom in on the ball here. The fact that he was willing to have a look, I'm going to have a bloody crack. That is class. Absolutely loved it. Great goal. And you've got to take those moments. And it was one of few moments for Arsenal who have their backs against the wall. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Now, that's not the end of it, is it? That isn't the end of it because other things happen. They get themselves another goal, don't they? Now, this time, we have to put it on Kyle Walker. A week ago, I spoke with great emotion at my disappointment of Romero. Now, it was interesting. Kyle Walker, wasn't he? He was just tapping him. Tap, 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 tap-a-roo. Look, he looks all at sea here. And if we're going by the same rules, you're miles off it. And again, I think the difference here is that because of the week before, where Gabriel makes the run to this front post, and they will have done their clips and they will know that with all these players at the back post, sometimes they do go to the front post. His body position was quite an interesting one where he was sort of tapping him, trying to put him off. But again, my rule is that you have an arm either side, not holding him, an arm either side, to know which way he goes. But obviously, 10 minutes before, he'd gone to the back post. And so I think normally I would go, come on, you've got to stop him going to the back post. But the difference here is that he had scored the week before at the front post. So here's all at sea. Life is incredibly difficult. But Gabriel, you cannot take anything away from this guy. He's a joke, an absolute joke when it comes to scoring goals. And the delivery is absolutely on the money every single time from Bukayo Saka. Carbon copy. And it's these cheap goals, let's say, because you've not opened up the opposition. There is huge value in this. And Arteta, there's one person he needs to thank. I'm going to tell you who that person is. And you're not going to like it, Arsenal fans. But if you show some humility, I think you can like it if you'd like to. That wasn't the end of the controversy, of course, as well. It then led to this. Trossard, for me, again, no complaints at all. The first one, you're pulling him back. It's kind of always given as a booking. And that happens, right? That's almost softer than this one. This one, it's, look at the time. You're 2-1 up. They've been hammering you. You're nearly there. Don't do this. You don't need to win it. I get it's Bernardo Silva and he's a little bit smaller than you, but just I found that incredibly strange. And he's cost his team there. And so from the position that they had themselves in, which was defensively resolute, apart from that one moment of brilliance, I think, from Man City. Obviously, Gundogan hit the post actually from a free kick as well. It then heads into the second half. And so this has to change, right? Trossard's come off. But that 4-4-2 out of possession, I thought what was really interesting is that when I had a look at the average positions myself, there was low player involvement from Trossard and Havertz, and that affects where you can put them in terms of the average positions. And so these two players were a little bit obsolete anyway in the game. They weren't being involved. In fact, Havertz didn't complete a pass in the entire game. Neither did Timber, which is just wild. So what does Arteta do? He does what he did the week before. He leans on his defence. He leans on dealing with the box and winning the duels. And he leans on the recruitment of which he has put together. And that is to have big old boys who can stop the opposition. Because you're now down to 10 men. So you've lost Trossard, who's one of those players, but defensively wasn't offering too much. But if we look at the tactics that he went for, he started off with this. So he started off with a 5 at the back. Saka came off. Trossard obviously came off because he got sent off. I think Havertz, actually, to be fair, is here. Martinelli is kind of here, but let's be honest, it's a flat 4, and it's a 5 and a 4, and it was about being compact. Ben White comes on the pitch, and it was all right, but he had to go one step further. If we have a look at the setup here, let's go to, that's the 6-3 that it turned into. But we started off with this, and this is really crucial, I think. I think Arteta's maybe seen this from Saliba, and he's gone, hang on a minute, I need to be able to change it. So we've got that 5, as you can see, and we've got the 4 in front of it. And the crucial thing was being compact, as Rafael Benitez would say. But as he is pointing right there, the problem was these half spaces. There were just these little gaps that he couldn't afford to have, because the important thing is that 18-yard box and not allowing them to come through. And when you've got the great players that they've got, they're going to look for these areas and attack these areas. And so it was about giving up on certain areas of the pitch and just stopping your opponent. And so he went to the next level. We'll come back to that one, because what he went and did is he turned it into a 6. Let's go to the 6 here. Let's go to the tactics board. So on the tactics board here, Martinelli then, because Calafiori was getting pulled out by one of the wide players, and I think they were fearful that the same would obviously happen on this side. He said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to have this as our back line, and Martinelli's going to come in here. And it became a 6-3. Now, this meant a couple of things. And the most important thing was that these players, 1, 2, 3, 4, they were allowed the ball. And those players were Kovacic, Kyle Walker, Ruben Dias, and Akanji. And it was one of those ones where, look, if we get done by a long shot, so be it. I could probably live with that. But what you're not going to be able to do is come through the middle. And if you put a cross in, we're not going to let Haaland win it, who is your biggest threat by an absolute mile. And so back post on both sides, and we saw it, didn't we? We saw it right here. In terms of those average positions, Saliba so deep down here. It's absolutely crazy. There he is on the 6-yard line. And he had to be, because there was always those crosses in behind throughout the game. And then you saw it. You could see it on the pitch itself. And as I say, the ability then to allow Ben White, if he needs to go, or Calafiori if he needs to go, you've still then got 2 centre-backs to deal with Erling Haaland as well, or another one as well. And then all of a sudden, it actually becomes one-on-one for a lot of it. But again, you're inviting crosses into the box. And as I said, you're allowing certain players to have the ball. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those 4 players were allowed the ball. And the crucial thing here as well is that it was about being compact. And you can see this here, because despite this team having to go back onto their 18-yard line, the penalty spot, the 6-yard line, in this instance, it was about being compact. And so even here, you've got 2 defenders looking to be proactive to ensure that no one turns at any point. It was absolutely brilliant. Now, you need a little bit of luck at times, but here's a great example as well. Kyle Walker having the ball. They were looking to have those shots. And it led to, and I think that's why they kept Gvardiol on in the end, because you needed another big lad to sort of try and deal with some of the crosses that came in. But overall, it was really, really clever play, and something that I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a little bit more of, in terms of that 6 in the 18-yard box, but being proactive in terms of those players in the half spaces. You've got to have a lot of legs in that middle of the midfield. And actually, you've got to have size as well, which they had. And you kind of roll the dice a little bit. And they had absolutely nothing going forward, but that's, of course, because they had 10 men as well. I think they had 12% possession in the second half. It was absolutely astounding. And there's one man. Now, they've got a draw. Get a draw, get out of there. Happy days. Arsenal fans in the comments, let me know. You are absolutely buzzing. Man City fans, I think, look, you get out of there with a draw. It's not the end of the world as well. And I think over the course of the season, you would expect that you're good enough to get the job done in terms of winning the league this year. But there's someone that needs to be thanked here, and I'm going to say it with my chest, and you're not going to like it, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I've seen it for a while now. And yes, of course, there's fantastic football on show with Arsenal over the last couple of years. But under the tutelage of one man, Mikel Arteta has grown a team that can get out of these places with a 2-2 draw, can get out of that Spurs game when Spurs got a lot of the ball and domination in terms of territory with a victory. And I'm going to go to the close-up to say it. It's David Moyes. This is what David Moyes did. Fantastic at set pieces. Midfielders who can step forward into the front line, going long at times when you have to. It's ugly, but it's what winners do. When you haven't got the quality over the opposition, you've got to find a different way, which leads me to my final question, which is, actually, the title race, bizarrely, after the week that they've had, and they've done so well, it starts now. Because as much as you've got the points that you've got, and every Arsenal fan is delighted with this, surely. But is it Leicester next week? You now, without Odegaard, have you got enough to beat the rest? You've done so well this week. That is my question for you in the comments. Let me know how you're feeling about it. We're very close to 350k. We need 100 more subs. Click that button for me. Thanks for watching. Speak soon.